Welcome to week 7 asynchronous content. So this week's topic for asynchronous would be learning how to set up the learning environment and also the provision of materials and resources. Knowing how to set up a learning environment for music is important, but first we will need to know what type of music materials and resources are appropriate to promote children's development in music and movement. That's why in today's session, we'll be learning more about how to set up a conducive learning environment using appropriate materials and resources to promote children's development in music and movement. Also, music educational technology tools are considered as possible music resources too. So we're going to start on learning environments that promote children's development in music. And first, how to plan a music area. In many Singapore preschools, not many schools have the luxury of having a music area due to their constraint of space. However, this obstacle should not pose as an excuse to never ever set up a music area in the form of a music center or music room. So we must know and we need such a music area in order to promote children's music making and learning. So when we plan for a music area, we should be mindful to include materials that allow children to manipulate around, such as instruments and props as well. And so these will be able to help children to learn how to compare and contrast the sounds of the variety of materials that you have provided, namely the instruments that you have provided them. And when you place these instruments or materials in the music area, you must take note that the instruments have to be neatly grouped together. So guys, you need to apply general housekeeping rules here. For example, if you have a bunch of color pencils, will you want to randomly place them on your desk, or would you want to put all the color pencils in a holder? The answer is quite obvious, right? That we will put the color pencils in a holder instead. So similarly, if you have 5 cabasses, do I want to randomly place them anywhere in my music area, or would I want to neatly keep them in a tray for easy access? And then I have to also label the trays so that children know what this tray is for. Again, the answer is quite obvious, right? And the answer is yes, we will definitely want to put the 5 cabasas in a labeled tray. So let's also be smart about what kind of music instruments that we want to include in our music area. We don't ever want to overload the music area with all the music instruments that we have in the school. Instead, how can we be smart about this? Keep this in mind. Ration and rotate the instruments provided in the music area. Number 1, ration. Ration a number of music instruments to be included in your music area, so you can just put in a few music instruments once every term or month. And then number 2, rotate. Rotate the instruments throughout the year. So do not put the same instrument there for the entire year. Instead, you want to then just rotate out the different instruments that you have rationed out throughout the entire year. And unique instruments that are cultural can be included a month or a few weeks before the beginning of the cultural festival. So that is how you can rotate and have enough instruments to last through the entire year. So here, I'm going to talk about guidelines to set up a music area. So just like in society, we have laws and regulations that tell us what kind of behaviors are acceptable and what are not acceptable. Similarly, in a preschool, every area that you design and set up for children needs to have rules and guidelines. Therefore, you will need to set clear rules for the children to know how to use the music area properly. Don't just put up a poster or signs that prohibit certain behaviors, but you really need to explain it verbally and also state some examples of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. Teach the children how to handle the instruments and props by role modeling. So, for example, how do I pick up the instrument? How do I hold it? How do I use it properly? How will I place it down properly? And how will I finally store it after I'm done using it? Okay, and also let the children know what are the available activities in the music area, and that they have a free choice in participating in any of the child-directed music activities within the music area itself. And because the music area has instruments and it involves sound making, so avoid placing the music area beside quiet areas such as the library area or the writing area. So here's an example of a music area. The music center should not be located near the other learning areas, as the noise created by children in the music center may be too distracting for the other children. So if I was a child at the library center and the music area is just beside the library center, I wouldn't be able to concentrate on the book that I'm reading because the music area is just too loud. Okay, this is the role of a teacher who sets up the music area. So when we set up a music area, what do we need to take note of? What's our role as a Okay, so if you are a music and if you are a museum enthusiast, would you want to visit a museum that has galleries that don't change over time, where the galleries are always the same throughout the year? Or would you rather enjoy visiting a museum that has new themes and galleries from time to time? Personally, I would want to visit the museum that changes its themes and galleries from time to time, because then the exhibits that I see in the museum will be new, will be interesting, and it keeps my interest going, and it wants me to keep coming back to the museum because I know that there are new things that will appear in the museum. So similarly, now let's apply this thought, this understanding to a music area in a preschool. Okay, so we as teachers, we are going to play the role as a museum curator to update the materials and activities in the music area to keep it interesting for the children. Alright? Because if you have the same old material for the entire year, okay, maybe for the first week the children find it interesting, find the materials new and refreshing. But if it's going to be the same old activity throughout the whole year, I can tell you, by the end of the first month, the children will be bored of the activities already because they are already done with the activities, they know what's supposed to be done, there's nothing new for them there. So instead, they would want to explore other open-ended materials in other learning areas, such as the block center, such as the writing center, or the art center. Alright, so while the children are in the music area interacting with the instruments and working on the activities, you want to also observe how they learn about the music concepts. How are they practicing the music concepts that you have taught them? So while you're observing, then you can kind of have a better sensing whether the children are getting it or not, so that you can then fine-tune or add more supplementary materials or activities to help the children understand the concept better, or you can help them to do more complex tasks related to that music concept. Okay, third point, to be a model on how to handle the instruments. So similarly, when you demonstrate to children how to handle the instruments, you also must practice what you preach. There is no exception for teachers to behave badly and ill-treat the instruments, and then we expect the children to do the right thing, because children look at us as role models. So if we do something wrong, they would follow suit because they don't know any better. Therefore, we cannot have double standards like that. Alright? So if we want children to handle the instruments well, we must be good role models of that. So fourth point, Include relevant charts on the wall to stimulate musical interest. So if you've ever walked to the Esplanade via the CityLink Mall, underground mall, you would have to walk through the underground tunnel with all the installations and posters featuring upcoming music or dance concerts, right? So if you were really keen in the arts, those posters would have caught your attention and generated interest. So hold this understanding and then now transfer this understanding to the bare walls of your music area. Alright, so what can we do with the bare walls of the music area to stimulate music interest? Yeah, so you might be thinking along the same track as me, which is to put in relevant music related charts on the wall to generate interest. Things that the children haven't seen before, you can put it up on the wall and that gets them interested to find out more about what this poster is about. If it's an instrument they haven't seen before in the poster you have provided, then they will also be curious to find out, oh, what is this poster about? So I'm going to talk about materials that you can include in a music area. So this is the list of materials that you can include in your music area. I'm just going to pause here for 10 seconds for you to read through this. If you need more time, just hit the pause button and you can read it through. Right, so that's 10 seconds. Right, so here, these are materials in the music area that you can consider putting in. I am talking about the picture that you see on the right hand side of the image in this slide. So here is how a typical space constrained preschool can still have a music area which looks like this. Okay, if you have half the space, then just use half the space of what you see in the picture. So don't be so bothered by how little space you have to work with, but think about what you can add in this particular given space. So if you have a smaller space, that means that you can change out the activities in the music area a few more times so that you can still provide children with a positive music experience. Okay, we've come to almost the last part of the asynchronous part of this lesson. So this slide will introduce to you the types of iPad music apps that we can use in the class. So you have Music Sparkles, Play Opera, Music Quest, GarageBand. So GarageBand is a free app developed by Apple. It's pre-installed in most iPads that you buy off the shelves. So take time to explore this app, and it's a really good app to use. So many new apps spring up in the App Store from time to time, so we can never ever keep up to date with all these different music apps. So because of that, before you use that particular music app with the children or for yourself, you have to assess the app to see if it's really good to be used. So here are some facilitating questions to guide yourself in picking the right application. So question 1, is this app something to aid in my curating of music content for children, or is it something that is usable for children straight away? And think about whether it is too difficult for children to use. If it's all filled with words and instructions, written instructions, will the children be able to read those words? And my take is probably not. So then ask yourself the next question. Are there good reasons to use these apps? Can these apps be replaced by a physical hands-on experiences? Next question to ask. What are the advantages, if any, of using these apps over the traditional ways of teaching music? So if using the app saves time, it helps the children to also learn the music concept better, then think about maybe planning your music activity using these apps instead of the traditional ways of teaching music? And lastly, when would you consider using these apps and why? Alright, so that concludes today's lesson, asynchronous lesson on week 7. This is the reference, and if you want to find this book when school reopens again, when you are able to get back to school, you can find this book in the Ngee Poly library. Alright, so that's all for today. Everyone, please continue to stay safe, do practice your safe distancing, and we'll see you on campus whenever we can. Alright, bye guys.